What happens when Andrew Garfield confronts Joy Behar live on national television? Before we step into that moment, before the silence, before the gasps, before the camera cuts to commercial, make sure you hit subscribe to live narratives like this video and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, because what unfolded that morning wasn't just awkward television. It was a collision of pride, politics, vulnerability, and two personalities who were never supposed to clash like that. The studio lights inside The View burned brighter than usual that day. The audience had been buzzing for hours. Andrew Garfield, the charming, introspective actor known for his emotional depth and careful choice of words, was scheduled to promote his latest film. Nothing controversial, nothing explosive, just another press stop. At least, that's what everyone thought. Andrew walked out to applause that rolled through the studio like a warm wave. He wore a dark tailored suit, slightly rumpled in that effortlessly artistic way. His smile was soft but alert, eyes scanning the crowd as if he was measuring the temperature of the room. He hugged the hosts, including Joy Behar, who offered her signature half-smile, the kind that can either mean affection or a setup. They sat. Coffee mugs clinked against the table. The cameras tightened in. The first few minutes were smooth. They talked about the film, about the emotional toll of stepping into such heavy roles. Andrew spoke gently, his voice layered with thoughtfulness. "I think art," he said, hands clasped loosely, "is about empathy. It's about stepping into someone else's pain and carrying it carefully." The audience nodded. A few murmurs of appreciation. Joy tilted her head. "And yet," she said casually, flipping her cue card, "you've also been pretty vocal off-screen lately." The temperature shifted, barely noticeable, but enough. Andrew's jaw tightened for a fraction of a second. "I try to be honest," he replied. Joy leaned forward. "Honest is good. But some people feel actors should stick to acting. That when celebrities start preaching, it feels disconnected from real life." There it was. A ripple passed through the audience. Not loud, just enough to feel. Andrew didn't laugh it off. He didn't give the usual polished PR answer. Instead, he inhaled slowly, as if weighing the cost of what he was about to say. "I don't think empathy is disconnected from real life," he said evenly. "I think it's the most real thing we have." Joy raised an eyebrow.
Sure.
But when someone with your platform starts criticizing systems or governments, people wonder if you understand the consequences regular families face. The air thickened. One of the other hosts shifted uncomfortably in her chair. The producers in the control room leaned forward. This wasn't on the rundown. Andrew's fingers tightened around his mug. For a second, he looked down at the table, not in defeat, but in restraint. "You're assuming," he said softly, "that I don't know struggle." The audience quieted. Completely. Joy's smile flickered. "I'm not assuming anything. I'm asking whether Hollywood sometimes lives in a bubble." Andrew's eyes lifted, and there was something different in them now. Not anger. Not exactly. But a decision. "I grew up with very little," he said, voice steady but lower. "My parents worked themselves to exhaustion. I've seen what stress does to people. I've seen what it means to not know if things will work out." The room was silent enough to hear the faint hum of the lights overhead. Joy crossed her arms. "And now you're worth millions." A few audience members gasped at the bluntness. Andrew didn't blink. "Yes," he answered. "And that doesn't erase where I came from. If anything, it makes me more responsible to speak." The words hung between them like a line drawn in chalk. One of the co-hosts attempted to pivot. "Let's talk about the film again." But Joy wasn't finished. "Responsible," she repeated. Or self-righteous? There it was. The spark hitting dry wood. The audience reaction was split, half stunned silence, half uncomfortable murmuring. Andrew leaned back slightly in his chair, studying her. "You think I'm self-righteous?" he asked, not accusatory, genuinely curious. "I think," Joy replied, "that sometimes actors mistake applause for expertise." A few scattered claps echoed from somewhere in the crowd, but they died quickly. Andrew's lips pressed together. He nodded slowly, almost respectfully. But when he spoke again, his voice carried a new firmness. "Applause isn't expertise. But silence isn't wisdom either." The studio felt smaller. The cameras zoomed tighter, capturing every twitch, every breath. Joy leaned closer. So, what is it then? Andrew's gaze didn't waver. It's humanity. A pause. And if we have platforms, if we have voices that reach millions, staying quiet out of fear of criticism, that's a privilege I don't want to use. Somewhere in the audience, someone whispered, "Wow." Joy opened her mouth to respond, but Andrew continued, not loudly, not aggressively, just undeniably. "You have a platform too," he said gently, "and you use it every day. Why is it different when I do?" The question landed harder than anything else he'd said. Joy blinked. For the first time, she hesitated. The other hosts glanced at each other. This wasn't playful banter anymore. This was philosophical chess on live television, and neither player was backing down. Joy straightened in her chair. "Because this is a news show." Andrew tilted his head slightly. "And film isn't commentary?" A sharp intake of breath from the audience. He wasn't smiling anymore. He wasn't promoting a movie. He was standing in something personal now. The producer's voice crackled faintly in Joy's earpiece, unheard by viewers, but visible in the slight distraction on her face. The countdown to commercial break had been moved up, but neither of them stopped. Joy tried to regain control. "We invite debate here," she said crisply. "But don't pretend there aren't people who feel talked down to by celebrities." Andrew nodded slowly. "Then let's talk to them, not down to them." And for a second, just a second, the audience began to clap. Not loud, not unanimous, but growing. Joy glanced toward the cameras, calculating. Andrew looked directly into one. And that's when the atmosphere shifted from tense to electric. Because this wasn't a rehearsed exchange anymore. This was two worldviews colliding in real time, and neither of them seemed willing to soften. The red on air light glowed like a warning. The floor manager gestured frantically toward the break. But before the screen faded to commercial, Andrew said, "One more thing. Calm. Clear. Unflinching. If having empathy makes me self-righteous, then I'll accept that." The audience erupted, some cheering, some stunned into silence. And Joy Behar's expression hardened, because when they came back from that break, it wasn't going to be about the movie anymore. The applause didn't fully die even as the screen cut to commercial. It lingered uneven, divided, like a storm that hadn't decided whether to pass or tear the roof off. The second the red light blinked off, the studio exhaled. Producers rushed to the edge of the stage. One of the co-hosts leaned toward Joy Behar, whispering something urgent. Joy nodded, but didn't break eye contact with Andrew Garfield. Andrew sat still, hands folded now, posture calm. But up close, you could see the pulse beating in his neck. He wasn't rattled, but he was charged. A stagehand approached with powder for touch-ups. Andrew waved it off gently. "I'm good," he murmured. Across the table, Joy adjusted her microphone. "You wanted a conversation," she said quietly, not smiling. Andrew met her gaze. "I still do." 10 seconds to live. 5. The countdown echoed in the studio. 3, 2. The red light flared back on. "And we're back," Joy announced smoothly, her voice carrying that polished television composure, the one that hides fractures beneath it. Things got a little passionate before the break. A few nervous chuckles from the audience. Andrew gave a small nod. Passion's not a bad thing. Joy folded her hands. "No. But clarity matters. So let me clarify something." She turned slightly toward him. "When I question celebrities stepping into political conversations, it's not because I don't value empathy. It's because influence carries weight. Words move markets. They sway young minds. That's not small." Andrew listened carefully. No interruptions. "But," she continued, "there's a difference between raising awareness and positioning yourself as morally superior." The tension crept back in, quieter this time, more surgical. Andrew leaned forward slightly. "Do you believe I've positioned myself that way?" "I think," Joy said carefully, "that when you say silence is privilege, some viewers hear condemnation." A murmur of agreement came from somewhere in the back row. Andrew nodded slowly, absorbing it. That's fair, he said. The admission caught everyone off guard. Joy blinked. It is. Yes. Andrew's voice softened. If someone feels judged, that matters. That's not my intention. The audience shifted. The energy changed, not explosive now, but probing. But here's what I struggle with, Andrew continued. We tell artists to inspire people, to move them,
To stand for something.
and then when we do, we're told to sit down. Joy's lips tightened slightly. You're not being told to sit down. You're being asked to recognize limits. Who defines those limits? Andrew asked. There was again not loud, not aggressive, just precise. Joy exhaled through her nose. Reality does. Expertise does. Andrew tilted his head. So, unless I hold a degree in public policy, I can't express concern? That's not what I said. It's what it feels like. The audience reacted. Soft applause from one side, silence from another. One of the co-hosts tried to mediate. Maybe this is about responsibility on both sides. But Andrew and Joy were locked in now. Joy leaned in slightly. You have millions of followers. When you post something critical, it amplifies. That's power. Andrew nodded. Agreed. And power, she pressed, should be handled carefully. Andrew's eyes flickered, a flash of something personal. I've spent years in therapy learning how to handle power carefully, he said quietly. The room stilled. Joy hadn't expected that turn. Andrew continued, voice steady but more vulnerable now. Fame is disorienting. It can distort your sense of self. I've worked hard not to let it. The audience listened, fully engaged. So when I speak, he said, it's not from ego. It's from fear, from compassion, from wanting things to hurt less for people. Joy studied him, her expression softening just a fraction. But compassion, she said, can still be misguided. Andrew nodded again. Absolutely. Another surprise. I'm not claiming perfection, he added. I'm claiming humanity. The word hung between them again, humanity. Joy crossed her legs, leaning back this time. Then maybe the real issue, she said, is tone. Andrew raised an eyebrow slightly. Sometimes, Joy continued, your interviews, your speeches, they carry intensity. It can feel like you're indicting anyone who disagrees. Andrew inhaled slowly. Intensity is an indictment, he replied. It's urgency. Urgency about what? About suffering. The audience reacted audibly at that, not clapping, not gasping.
Just feeling it.
Joy tapped her pen against the table. And do you think people here, she gestured to the hosts, the studio, don't care about suffering? Andrew shook his head immediately.
No.
I think you do. Then why the implication that silence equals privilege? Andrew paused. This was the crossroads. Because sometimes, he said carefully, silence protects comfort. Joy's eyes sharpened. And sometimes, she countered, silence protects unity. The words landed heavy. For the first time, Andrew hesitated.
Unity.
The audience shifted, sensing the shift in terrain. Unity at the cost of truth? Andrew asked. Unity at the cost of division, Joy replied.
A beat.
Andrew leaned back, studying her the way someone studies a painting they're trying to understand. I don't want division, he said. But pretending disagreements don't exist doesn't heal them. Joy's voice lowered. And spotlighting them on every platform does? The camera zoomed tighter. The producers weren't cutting away now. Ratings were climbing, though no one in the room could see that yet. Andrew's fingers tapped lightly against his knee, the first visible sign of nerves. I don't have all the answers, he admitted. But I know what it feels like to care deeply and be told that caring is arrogance. Joy's expression flickered again, something human passing across it. No one's saying caring is arrogance, she said, softer now. It feels like it, Andrew repeated. Silence fell, not hostile, not explosive, just dense. The co-host to Joy's right spoke gently. Maybe this is less about who gets to speak and more about how we listen. The audience murmured agreement. Andrew turned slightly toward her. Listening requires openness. Joy nodded slowly. And humility. Their eyes met again. This time, there wasn't fire. There was recognition. But it wasn't resolution. Joy glanced at the camera. We're going to take one audience question. A young woman stood up, microphone trembling in her hand. Hi, she said nervously. My question is, do you think this kind of debate helps people at home, or just makes them more divided? The room held its breath. Joy gestured to Andrew first. He looked at the audience member, really looked at her. I think debate without empathy divides, he said. But debate with vulnerability can connect. Joy nodded thoughtfully. And I think, she added, that sometimes vulnerability requires stepping back as much as stepping forward. The applause this time was stronger, not because someone had won, but because something real had unfolded. But beneath the surface, the tension hadn't vanished. It had transformed. Because this wasn't just a disagreement about celebrity activism anymore. It had become personal. And as the segment timer ticked down, Andrew glanced once more toward Joy, not combative now, but searching, as if he were about to ask something deeper, something that would push this conversation past philosophy and straight into identity. The applause from the audience question faded into a thoughtful hush, but something had shifted beneath the surface. This wasn't just about activism anymore. It wasn't about Hollywood or politics or tone. It was about identity. The camera angle tightened as the segment clock flashed 2 minutes remaining. Normally, that meant wrapping up. A polite close. A plug for the movie. Smiles. Applause. But neither Andrew Garfield nor Joy Behar looked ready to retreat. Andrew leaned forward again, elbows lightly resting on the table now, body language open but intent. He wasn't performing. He was thinking, and thinking publicly. Can I ask you something? He said, voice steady but lower. Joy tilted her head. Go ahead. The studio went silent in that peculiar way live television sometimes does, when everyone senses that the next words will matter more than the ones before them. When you challenge actors speaking out, Andrew began carefully. Is it because you think we're unqualified, or because you think we're disingenuous? The question didn't feel rehearsed. It felt personal. Joy blinked, clearly not expecting the frame of it. That's a strong distinction, she replied. It is, Andrew said, because one questions knowledge. The other questions integrity. A quiet ripple moved through the audience. Joy sat back slightly, buying time. The other hosts were watching her closely now. This wasn't a quick exchange anymore. This was layered. I don't assume disingenuousness, she said finally. But I do question whether celebrities sometimes underestimate how their words land. Andrew nodded slowly. That's fair, he said. But do you think we're uniquely guilty of that? Or do you think everyone with a microphone should be held to that same standard? Joy's lips pressed together for a moment. Everyone with a microphone, she answered. Andrew gestured lightly toward the set, the cameras, the bright studio lights of the view glowing behind them. Then we're in the same boat. The audience murmured. Joy gave a half smile. We are. But our job is to question. Yours is to entertain. There was again that invisible line being drawn. Andrew's jaw tightened slightly, but his voice remained measured. My job, he said quietly, is to tell stories. And stories shape how people see the world. The intensity in the room deepened. You don't think talk shows do the same? Joy asked. I think they absolutely do. Then why does it bother you when we question your perspective? Andrew paused. Because this wasn't just about perspective anymore. It was about legitimacy. It doesn't bother me that you question, he said slowly. It bothers me when the question assumes that caring is naive. Joy's expression shifted, not defensive, not aggressive, but thoughtful. Caring isn't naive, she said. Then why does it feel like I'm being asked to prove that I deserve to care publicly? That landed differently. The audience leaned forward. A few heads nodded. Joy folded her hands together. Because when you speak from a place of influence, people want to know where it comes from. Andrew exhaled slowly. It comes from grief, he said. The word hung heavy. Joy's face softened. The co-host straightened. Grief? She asked gently. Andrew's eyes flickered. Not to the camera this time, but somewhere inward. Grief for the way the world feels sometimes, he said. Grief for friends who struggle quietly. Grief for systems that don't always protect the vulnerable. The room wasn't tense now. It was listening. Joy nodded slightly. That's human. Yes, Andrew replied. It is. But, she continued, so is frustration. And some viewers feel frustrated when wealthy actors lecture them about hardship. There it was, the undercurrent finally spoken aloud. Andrew didn't flinch. I understand that frustration, he said. I really do. Joy raised an eyebrow slightly, surprised at the lack of pushback. But here's the thing, Andrew continued, voice firming just a little. Money doesn't erase conscience. It doesn't erase memory. It doesn't erase empathy. The audience clapped lightly. And it doesn't erase the responsibility to learn, he added. Joy nodded once. Learning is good. Preaching is not. Andrew leaned back, considering her words. What if, he said slowly, what you hear as preaching is just someone processing out loud? The studio grew quiet again. Joy looked at him differently now, less as a guest, more as a person. Processing on a stage this large, she said, gesturing around them, is a powerful act. Yes, Andrew agreed. It is.
A beat.
And power, Joy said, echoing her earlier point, requires caution. Andrew met her eyes. Agreed. That word surprised everyone, including Joy. But Andrew wasn't finished. Caution doesn't mean silence, he added. Joy's lips curved slightly. And expression doesn't mean immunity from critique. Andrew smiled faintly for the first time in several minutes. Touché. The audience laughed softly, tension easing just a fraction. But beneath that lighter moment, something deeper was forming, a recognition that this wasn't about right or wrong. It was about fear. Fear of misuse. Fear of misunderstanding. Fear of losing control of narratives. Joy leaned forward again, but her tone had shifted. You know, she said, when I challenge you, it's not because I want you silent. It's because I've watched decades of public discourse spiral out of control. Andrew listened intently. I've seen how words ignite things, she continued. And sometimes when you speak with that intensity, I worry. Andrew absorbed that. You worry about what? He asked quietly. I worry, Joy said, that people don't always hear the nuance you intend. The honesty in her voice changed the room again. Andrew nodded slowly. That's a valid fear, he admitted. And I worry, he added after a moment, that asking artists to dilute their intensity creates apathy. The audience responded with a low murmur of agreement. Joy looked at him steadily. So, what's the balance? She asked. Andrew didn't answer immediately, because this wasn't a debate point anymore. It was a real question.
Finally, he spoke.
Maybe the balance, he said, is conversations like this. A quiet stillness settled over the studio, not because anyone had won, but because something honest had unfolded, messy, imperfect, but real. The segment timer blinked red. 30 seconds. Joy glanced at the camera. Well, she said, voice steadier now, I think that's the most civil disagreement we've had in a while. Light laughter from the audience. Andrew smiled, genuinely this time. I don't mind disagreement, he said. I mind dismissal. Joy held his gaze. Fair enough. The applause began to rise again, stronger now, more unified. But as the clapping swelled, something unexpected happened. Andrew turned slightly toward Joy one last time before the close. And for what it's worth, he said quietly, just loud enough for the mic to catch it, I respect what you do. Joy's expression shifted. Surprise, then something almost vulnerable. Thank you, she replied. The red light flickered. And as the host began the wrap-up, the audience sensed it too. This confrontation hadn't exploded. It had evolved. But evolution can be just as unsettling as conflict. Because when the show ended, the internet wouldn't see nuance. It would see clips. And those clips were already being cut. The moment the show cut to its final segment and the theme music swelled through the studio, something invisible snapped into motion. Phones lit up in the audience. Producers rushed off stage with tight smiles. Assistants whispered urgently into headsets. Because while the conversation between Andrew Garfield and Joy Behar had ended with civility, the real storm was just beginning. Backstage, Andrew walked down the narrow hallway lined with framed photographs of past guests from The View. His publicist was already waiting, phone pressed to her ear. "It's trending," she mouthed to him. He didn't ask what it was. He already knew. Inside the host's dressing room, Joy closed the door softly behind her and removed her microphone. She stood in front of the mirror, staring at her reflection for a long second. Not angry, not triumphant, just thinking. A knock on the door. A producer stepped in. "That clip of 'Silence Protects Comfort' is blowing up," he said carefully. Joy exhaled. "Of course it is." Meanwhile, Andrew sat in a quiet corner backstage, scrolling through his phone. The first wave had already hit. Garfield claps back live. Joy Behar shuts down Hollywood preaching. Awkward moment on daytime TV. He read them without reacting, at least not outwardly. But his jaw tightened slightly. Because nuance doesn't trend. Conflict does. His publicist crouched beside him. "You handled it well," she said softly. Measured. Thoughtful. Andrew nodded once. "I wasn't trying to win," he murmured. "I know." Across town, clips were already circulating.
Short, sharp edits.
10-second bursts stripped of context. Joy saying, or self-righteous? Andrew replying, "Silence protects comfort."
Cut.
Dramatic music layered in by strangers online. Battle lines drawn in comment sections within minutes. Back in the studio hallway, one of the co-hosts approached Andrew before he left. "Hey," she said quietly. "That was intense." He gave a faint smile.
"Yeah."
"For what it's worth," she added, "it didn't feel hostile from my seat." Andrew's expression softened.
"Good."
Because hostility hadn't been his goal. But intention and perception were already diverging. Outside the building, a small crowd had gathered. Fans, reporters, curious bystanders. The moment Andrew stepped through the doors, flashes exploded. "Andrew, over here. Do you regret what you said? Were you calling Joy out?" He paused briefly, the city noise swelling around him. "I don't regret conversations," he said calmly. "I regret when we stop having them." And with that, he stepped into the waiting car. Inside her dressing room, Joy finally picked up her phone. The notifications were relentless. Some praised her for standing up to celebrity arrogance. Others accused her of trying to silence compassion. She scrolled, expression unreadable. Then she stopped at one particular comment. They were both right. That's what made it uncomfortable. Joy stared at it longer than the others. Because uncomfortable was accurate. That conversation hadn't been explosive in the traditional sense. No shouting. No insults. No walk-offs. But discomfort lingers longer than chaos. Later that evening, cable news panels began dissecting the exchange. Pundits replayed the most charged lines. Body language experts analyzed micro-expressions. "Did you see the way Andrew leaned in?" Joy's eyebrow lifted at that moment. Classic skepticism. The narrative was being rewritten in real time. And neither of them controlled it anymore. Andrew sat alone in his hotel room hours later, the city lights reflecting faintly against the window. The adrenaline had faded, replaced by something quieter.
Doubt.
He replayed the moment in his mind. Joy's tone, his words, the audience reactions. Had he come across as defensive? Had he been too intense? He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling. Across the city, Joy sat at her kitchen table with a cup of tea gone cold. The house was quiet. She wasn't thinking about ratings. She wasn't thinking about headlines. She was thinking about his face when he said the word grief. There had been no performance in it, just something raw. Her phone buzzed again, another text from a colleague praising her firmness. She set it face down, because firmness hadn't been what she felt in that moment. It had been concern. The next morning, the show's producers held a meeting. Ratings from the segment had spiked sharply. Social engagement had doubled. "Book him again," someone suggested half-jokingly. But rebooking wasn't simple. Because the conversation had cracked something open. not between them personally, but in the audience. Some viewers felt validated. Others felt alienated. And the divide wasn't clean. That was the unsettling part. Andrew's team debated whether to release a statement clarifying his comments. He shook his head. "No statements," he said quietly. "Let it breathe." Joy faced a similar suggestion. "Address it tomorrow," a producer recommended. "Lean into it." She considered it, then shook her head.
No.
"We said what we said." The internet, however, was not done. Hashtags formed. Fan edits amplified the most dramatic pauses. Commentators who hadn't watched the full segment weighed in, as if they had. But buried beneath the noise were longer discussions, threads where people debated responsibility, influence, empathy, power. Conversations that mirrored the one on stage. And that's when it became clear. This wasn't just a celebrity clash. It was a mirror, a reflection of a culture wrestling with who gets to speak, who gets to question, and how to hold both without tearing each other apart. 2 days later, Andrew attended a small film event. A journalist approached him cautiously. "Do you think you and Joy resolved anything?" she asked. Andrew smiled faintly. "I don't think resolution was the point," he replied. "And what was?" "Understanding." The journalist scribbled it down. That quote would circulate too. Meanwhile, Joy prepared for the next episode of the show. The teleprompter scrolled as usual. The coffee mugs were placed precisely. But when she sat in her chair, there was a subtle shift in her posture. Less guarded, more reflective. Because something about that exchange had unsettled her, not in anger, but in awareness. And as the cameras rolled again, viewers tuned in not just for headlines, but for aftershocks. Because when two strong voices collide without shouting, when they challenge each other without cruelty, it doesn't create a spectacle. It creates a question. And questions echo longer than arguments. But the biggest aftershock hadn't happened yet. Because 3 nights later, Andrew would do something no one expected. Something that would either close the loop or reopen it entirely. 3 nights later, the air inside the small theater in downtown Manhattan felt different. No flashing cameras. No daytime television lights. No applause signs. Just a quiet stage, a single microphone, and a sold-out audience expecting a routine Q&A after a private screening. When Andrew Garfield stepped onto that stage, there was applause, warm, steady, but beneath it, curiosity pulsed. Because everyone knew. Everyone had seen the clips. Everyone had picked a side, or pretended not to. Andrew waited for the room to settle. He thanked the director. He thanked the cast. He answered 2 safe questions about character preparation. Then, he did something no one expected. He brought it up himself. "I want to address something," he said calmly, adjusting the microphone stand. "Not to defend myself. Not to criticize anyone. But to clarify my heart." The room went still. He didn't say her name at first. But everyone knew he meant Joy Behar. "I went on The View to talk about a film," he continued. "And we ended up talking about responsibility.
About voice.
About silence." A few audience members nodded. "I've read the reactions," he admitted with a faint smile. "Some people think I won. Some think I was arrogant. Some think she was dismissive. Some think she was brave."
He paused.
"But if you're trying to figure out who won," he said softly, "you might be missing the point." The silence deepened. Not tense, but attentive. "I don't see that conversation as a battle," he continued. "I see it as friction. And friction can either start a fire or create warmth." There was a murmur of appreciation at that line. He took a breath. "I meant what I said about empathy. And I also hear what she said about caution." That was the part the internet hadn't clipped. "I don't want to live in a world where artists are silent," Andrew went on. "But I also don't want to live in a world where anyone thinks their platform makes them infallible." The audience applauded, stronger this time. "I don't regret speaking," he said. "And I don't regret being challenged." And then he said the thing no headline had predicted. "I respect her." The applause grew louder. "Disagreement isn't disrespect," he added. "It's dialogue." Back across town, Joy was at home again when someone sent her the clip from the event. She watched it alone. No makeup lights. No studio crew. No audience noise except what bled through the recording. Just Andrew's face, earnest and steady. I respect her. Joy leaned back slowly in her chair. For a woman who had spent decades on television navigating conflict, she understood something about public moments. Most people double down. Very few soften. The next morning on The View, Joy did something equally unexpected. Midway through the episode, after a lighter segment, she turned slightly toward the camera. "I want to say something briefly," she began. The other hosts looked surprised. "We had Andrew Garfield on recently. There's been a lot of chatter." The audience chuckled. "I stand by asking tough questions," she continued evenly. "That's part of this job." A ripple of applause. "But," she added, "I also appreciate guests who engage sincerely." And he did. There was a shift in the room, subtle but undeniable. "We may not agree on everything," Joy said, "but I don't question his heart." That line hit harder than any argument had, because it reframed the entire confrontation. Clips of her statement began circulating just as fast as the original debate had. Comment sections changed tone. Some critics stayed critical. Some supporters stayed defensive. But something new entered the conversation.
Complexity.
Media outlets that had framed it as a showdown now ran follow-ups about mutual respect. Panel discussions shifted from who was right to why are we so uncomfortable with nuance? And the audience, the real audience, not just the loudest voices online, started having deeper conversations. About celebrities. About journalists. About power. About empathy. Back at home, Andrew watched Joy's statement on his phone. He smiled quietly. Not triumphant. Just relieved. His publicist looked at him. "So," she asked, "are you glad you confronted her?" He shook his head gently. "I didn't confront her," he said. "I talked to her." And maybe that was the real twist. What happens when Andrew Garfield confronts Joy Behar live? The answer wasn't an explosion. It wasn't a walk-off. It wasn't a viral insult. It was tension without cruelty. Disagreement without dehumanization. Two people standing in their convictions, and then stepping back just enough to see each other clearly. The aftermath wasn't cancellation. It wasn't humiliation. It was conversation. Ratings had spiked. Social feeds had burned. Think pieces had flooded the internet. But days later, what lingered wasn't the sharpest line. It was the quietest one. "I respect her." And in a media culture addicted to outrage, that might have been the most radical thing said all week. Now I want to know what you think. Was Andrew right to push back? Was Joy right to challenge him? Did this conversation bridge something or deepen a divide? Drop your opinion in the comments. I read them all. And if you want more explosive, emotional, inside-the-moment stories like this, make sure you subscribe to Live Narratives and turn on notifications so you never miss the next unforgettable confrontation. Because sometimes the loudest moments on live television aren't the ones filled with shouting. They're the ones filled with truth.